In yet another shameful chapter of the federal government's mission to prosecute whistleblower David McBride comes news that Commonwealth prosecutors are pushing for a jail sentence, wanting to see McBride locked up for longer than 2 years. In a move that would no doubt make anyone think twice about blowing the whistle in the future, the Commonwealth submitted that anything less than jail time would be inappropriate. If you haven't kept up, back in November last year, David McBride was forced to plead guilty thanks to what we can probably politely describe as legal technicalities and good old national security intervention. Here's Acting Legal Director of the Human Rights Law Centre, Kieran Pender, explaining those circumstances to the media.
David McBride pleaded guilty for several reasons. One is that he effectively had already admitted that he had committed the crime. It was never any secret that he was the source of these documents. He had tried to rely on a whistleblowing defence, so under our whistleblowing law, in certain circumstances, you can blow the whistle lawfully to the media, and he said he'd done that. Unfortunately, that trial was at the last minute. He had to withdraw that defence after a national security intervention by the federal government. And then, similarly, an argument he ran in his substantive trial was also, he lost that, an argument that actually the public interest had a wider meaning and that he had acted in the public interest by exposing wrongdoing.
So 6 months later, David McBride, after pleading guilty, was back in court for sentencing, and the Commonwealth are really not messing around pushing for significant jail time. Kieran Pender outlined why the federal government's behaviour, both that of the coalition government in beginning this action and the Labor government in continuing to pursue this action, is absolutely shameful.
David McBride pleaded guilty to giving documents to the ABC that formed the basis of the ABC's landmark Afghan Files reporting which showed the public what had gone on in its name in Afghanistan, credible allegations of war crimes committed by Australian forces in Afghanistan. Today he's being sentenced for that crime, a crime of telling the truth about government wrongdoing committed in our name. But the first person facing jail for Australia's war crimes in Afghanistan is not the alleged war criminals, but the whistleblower.
We're limited in what we can put to a jury in terms of David's duty, which he's waited some 5 years to articulate. Together with the removal of evidence, it makes it impossible for us realistically to go to trial, and it is a sad day and a difficult day for us to advise David on his options this afternoon, and he embraced them.
And just a reminder that this prosecution could have been shut down at any time by Attorney General Mark Dreyfus. Dreyfus has the powers and he's exercised these powers before. For those not caught up, here's a brief trip down memory lane and a short clip from a video I did on this last year.
The Labor Attorney General Mark Dreyfus, who with a flick of his pen could end the prosecution of David McBride.
That is absolutely true.
It's true, as the member for Clark has pointed out in his motion, that the Attorney General has power under the Judiciary Act to discontinue proceedings.
As awkward as that may be for some people to hear or even say out loud, all that's needed is this guy and a pen. In case you had any doubt, here's a lawyer telling you this same thing.
The Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, KC, and the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions both have the power at any time to intervene and discontinue this case. There's no public interest in prosecuting whistleblowers. The Attorney General knows that. Last year he intervened to end the case against Bernard Collaery, who helped expose Australia's wrongdoing in Timor.
And all of that is still true today.
What about the hypocrisy, folks?
In the lead up to the last federal election, we saw the Labor Party criticising the coalition for its ongoing attacks on whistleblowers. And yet here we are, some 2 years into the Albanese government, and they are desperately trying to put David McBride, one of the nation's highest profile whistleblowers, in jail. This is a remarkable failure of leadership from the Labor government and shows just how many institutional barriers we face between getting the truth out to the public who have a right to hear this, and the institutional powers inside Canberra.
2 years ago, if you'd asked me, would a Labor government have allowed this to play out the way that they have, young, little, naive me would have said no way. But I also knew then what I know now. Our whistleblower protection laws are broken. Labor said they'd fix them, and they haven't.
Our whistleblower laws are broken. That's not something that I might say, that's something the Attorney General would say. He has promised, going into the past election, that he would fix our whistleblower laws. Firstly, I'll point out he hasn't. But secondly, he's allowing people who selflessly called out misconduct, selflessly revealed improper conduct, in some cases really severe, and are now, for their selflessness, facing some form of prosecution. And we, of course, see today here with David McBride, he's going to pay a fairly significant price for what he's done. He's already paid a fairly significant price for the good that he has done.
But as we all know, life is much simpler in opposition. The consequences of the government continuing to pursue this prosecution could be absolutely devastating for transparency in Australia. The impact this may have on deterring future whistleblowers from coming forward can't be overstated. But maybe deterring future whistleblowers is exactly the government's point. In an appearance on The Project last week, David McBride was asked what he'd say to potential whistleblowers, and his response was interesting.
Well, a lot of potential whistleblowers will likely be watching you and seeing the consequences of speaking up. What would you say to them?
It's a funny thing. I often get asked that question. And it's a funny answer because I can't pretend that it's not a hard road and that you'll probably lose your marriage, your job, and a lot more besides, your mind. But I still say do it. I still say if we're going to make Australia a better place, the world a better place, we need people to stand up. And if this helps for anyone's a bit spiritual, I've never liked myself so much. So you do get a real sort of personal satisfaction. And I think if enough people start to do it, we have the ability to change this country, if not the world, for the better. And that's something worthwhile.
Part of me wonders if the Labor government have decided to just let this case run its course, and then they may step in at the last minute if the eventual outcome causes them enough negative political fallout. By the way, if you want to let your local MP know how you feel about this, but you weren't sure how to go about it, visit the Whistleblower Justice Fund. There's a form on there that you can use that helps streamline the process if you need some help. The link's in the description. And just a friendly reminder that the government can intervene at any time.
It's true, as the member for Clark has pointed out in his motion, that the Attorney General has power under the Judiciary Act to discontinue proceedings.
The Attorney General can even step in and pardon David McBride after sentencing, although I'd suggest that the chances of the government growing a spine are fairly slim at this point given their years of inaction. That the first person facing jail for Australia's war crimes in Afghanistan is the whistleblower and not the alleged war criminals should be a source of great shame for the country. Should David McBride end up in jail, it should be a permanent stain on the record of the Labor government for allowing it to happen. Like it or not, the fact is, Labor could take action. They're just choosing not to.